Hey everybody, welcome to our short stories unit lesson 4, where we will be doing our first major written assignment, which I'll talk about in just a minute, based on another short story. So this will be the fourth short story that you guys will have done. We are working towards, doing an oral presentation, which I introduced yesterday. Today we will be working on your written assignment, and tomorrow we're working up to actually having a little test based on what we know. The test for tomorrow will be extremely similar to everything that you've done. There will be a short story, and there'll be a series of very specific questions that I ask. So last few times you've been pulling out things kind of on your own, just the broad topic of plot or character setting or any of the 6 elements of short story. Tomorrow I'll be asking some very specific questions based on those topics in a short story. So if you've been doing your homework and you're following along and you know your stuff, test should not be an issue for you at all. So just want to go over the lesson today, what we're going to be doing, and explain your first major assignment. Okay, so we're talking about here. So our learning goals, are here. Our success criteria in terms of what we're going to be able to do at the end of this unit is here. Starts off with a little talk about some character and characterization. Characterization being the way which we find out information about a character. And just I'm hoping you're realizing now, based on these short stories, that sometimes you got to really be careful what you believe. Sometimes you can't believe what you're told by the author. You can't believe what sometimes you're told by other characters through direct characterization. Sometimes it's the indirect characterization that's talked about here that really gives us an idea about a character. So I want you to keep these things in mind when you're reading the short story, The Lottery, today by Shirley Jackson. Very famous short story, one of my favorites. And see if you can kind of pick up what's happening in the short story as it's going along, based on how what the characters are saying, versus what they're doing. Little discussion assignment here is, we talk about so many great quotes have come from novels and great novels and works of literature that we use in our everyday lives, and sometimes we don't even realize where these great quotes are from. So I provided a few quotes from you here, just to kind of reinforce this idea that a lot of the things in our life that we use and talk about and the way we believe, a lot of times comes from literature. So what I'd like to do is, on this Padlet, I want you to include a motivational quote that you found from a piece of literature. It doesn't even have to be a piece of literature you've actually read yourself. It can be something it's a quote you've heard, it's from that particular book or short story, etc. So you're going to include a quote from a piece of literature that you find motivational. Be sure to state it in the form of a quote and state the title and author of the work that you borrowed it from. So here I am here. This is one of my favorite quotes. "This above all to the known self be true." Polonius, an old character, is talking to his son Laertes as he's going off to school away from home, and he is giving him a whole bunch of advice. And this is kind of the last piece of advice he gives him. I think it's very apropos that you always have to be true to yourself, as opposed to trying to be something for somebody else or something different. And this is from my favorite play, Hamlet, spoken by Polonius from William Shakespeare. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a quote down very similar to this. Please make sure that you have the author and the title of the work you're taking it from. And then you're also going to add a comment. And how we add a comment is you're going to go to someone else's post, like you would go to my post here and click add comment, and then you would simply type in, what it is that you believe. Don't comment on someone's post in your own. Make your post and then go and actually click on this here underneath someone else's post and comment on what they're doing. And it should be, the comment that you make should reinforce our discussion. It should move our discussion forward, and it should, always be positive. Anything you feel about their quote. A little more about, especially for your assignment that we're doing today, I would like for you to really want to reinforce this whole 3-step process you've heard me talk about before for answering a question. We call it a P paragraph, and it's because it's PEE. Anytime you answer a question or write a paragraph, this is what you'd like to do. So I've said before, the first part is to answer the question. So you have your point. Sum up the main idea in your paragraph, or in this case, for our case, answer the question, talk about how those elements of a short story appear in Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. You can start out, and there's some ways to start off sentences. Then there's E. The next thing you do is you provide evidence. You provide evidence for the point you're making. This will come for this assignment in the form of direct quotes from the story. Then it's not enough just to do that. Then we have to explain why the quotation is significant. What effect does the quotation have on the reader? Why does the reader use this technique? You don't have to do all three of these, but you certainly have to talk about one of them. Okay? So you have to answer the question, provide a quote, and then you have to explain how the quote proves what you talked about here under your point. You cannot let a quote speak for itself. You can't just say something, fire a quote down, and think, okay, well, teacher will figure it out. No, you actually have to do this part. If we just do this part, that's a level 1 or below, or level 2. If we just get to the point where we answer the question, provide a quote, that's about a level 2, 2.5 to 3. If we do all three of these, then we're getting up into a high level 3 or high level 4. Okay, so if you want a high level 4, make sure you hit all three of these pieces together. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be reading this story. It's called The Lottery. It's a very famous story. It's a long one, but there's a lot of dialogue. So it's not really as long as it appears. Please use your highlights in Google Highlights, or you can go to Google Read and Write, and it'll pull everything up for you. But certainly interact with in the story as you read it. Make sure you're adding comments to whatever you believe is happening, or if you have an observation, please put it down here. That way you can go back. You don't have to reread everything. You can just look to see where your comments were. And then, those comments, hopefully you've isolated things you feel are important. Once you've read the story and you have a good grasp of it, this is what we're going to be doing. This is actually your assignment. So what you're going to do is just make sure you always write in full and complete sentences using our 3-step process to answer your questions. Just talked about that. You're going to pull out all the elements of the short story in The Lottery. But instead of me asking you questions, you are going to do it kind of on your own. So please refer back to the 6 elements of short story handout that was provided to you on day 1 of the course, and the subsequent lessons and videos provided detailing what is relevant about each element of a short story. So here's where you're showing that you know what is important about each one of those elements of short story. And not only that you can pull it out of a short story that you've been given. It is your job to show that you know every aspect of each individual element and how it's to prove your ideas that are present. So make sure you go back and you look at that sheet I handed out on day 1, and maybe watch the videos again to make sure you're including everything that it is. If there's 4 steps, like plot is, what is happening in a short story and how it's what's happening. It's the inciting force and the climax. If you just give me a 2 or 3 line sentence about what happens in the story, you don't mention inciting force or climax, you're not showing that you know everything about that element, and you're going to lose marks. So that would actually be below level 1, because you're not even including the things that are most important. So you need to really show and prove here that you know what's important about each element. So what I've done is I've given you each element. So here you're going to outline the plot, whatever story you choose. For The Lottery. What is the plot? A couple sentences about plot. What's the inciting force? What's the climax? Character. Here you're going to outline whatever you believe a character, who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist, and why, and some elements of characterization. How do we know, how do we get information in the story by what characters say, what they do, what other people say, etc. And again, you're always using quotes to back up what you're saying. Setting, the where and the when. How does Shirley Jackson use the setting to kind of to give a means to her ends, to make us feel a certain way, to set the atmosphere and mood of the story? What is the point of view of the story? You're going to back that up. You're going to prove it. Then you're going to explain your quote. Conflict. What's the main conflict? Internal, external. List 1 or 2 of the conflicts that you feel are there. And again, always back it up. And theme. Okay, what is the lesson or message that Shirley Jackson is trying to teach us by the story? If you can state that in some way related to the real world today, that's great. The more detail you use here, the better your mark is going to be. Okay, and there will be a rubric that's associated with this as well. That I'll add at another time. So that's it. That's what we're doing for your assignment. It's our first major written assignment. So make sure that, we've been talking a lot about writing, that you have an opinion, you back it up with proof, and you explain how that proof proves your opinion. If you do that, you can't go wrong. Okay. Good luck with this.